Very slow picture.
As we all know, 2016 is an important year for UN Habitat, the Human Settlements Agency of the UN. And Quito, the capital of Ecuador, will be the scene for Habitat 3 and a new urban agenda. Mrs. Jacta, Director of UN Habitat New York office represents the office tonight, and so welcome, Mrs. Jacta. The UN Habitat New York office and Flanders House have planned 2 seminars on the implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development Goals and the new urban agenda. The main idea is to highlight spatial practices that facilitate an integrated approach to implementing the SDGs, both substantively and institutionally, bringing together US and Flemish practices. Today we will focus on the innovative use of urban design to provide integrated solutions. During our next seminar on July 13th, we will examine regeneration of urban regions through integrated spatial and economic policies and look closer into the cases of the cities of Genk, Flanders, and Pittsburgh, PA, Pennsylvania. And now I would like to give the floor to Mrs. Jacta, who will say a few words on tonight's topic.
Thank you very much, and thank you for hosting this event in such a wonderful place. It's really, it helps us actually be inspired and innovative, certainly looking at the world below our feet here. I would like to thank indeed the Flanders House for addressing the spatial dimension of the SDGs, and I think we're going to hear eminent speakers here. It includes also one of my colleagues, Mr. Andrew Rudd, and he's going to speak about the spatial dimension of the SDGs. So I will not say more about that, but just to say that actually you all know, as our host just said, this is an important year, and actually I just came from hearings with civil society that are being held right now. And of course, these 2 days have been about partnerships and about also sharing best practices and solutions, because none of us can do it alone, not the government, not the UN. So I think this is an excellent example of how we can share what we are doing and share solutions. And indeed, the title, I think, reflects what is going on within the UN, because we cannot address this new complex agenda, which is indeed integrated, requires innovative solutions, and requires partnership from all. So I cannot end without welcome, well, I don't know if I should welcome, but say that I'm delighted to meet Professor Laux from the University of Leuven, Catholic University of Leuven, with whom UN Habitat has a long-standing partnerships, and I understand that there was a publication in 2005 on localizing Agenda 21, which actually has been at the origin and has contributed to the reconceptualization of the potential of urban planning and design. And also I was of course delighted that Professor Laux has actually worked in the country where I was born, in Algeria, for a number of years. So we exchanged actually a few memories earlier. So on this, again, thank you very much to our host, and we are very happy to cooperate with the Flounder House. I'm also very happy to hear that we have other events planned, so I hope you will all come. And again, thank you, and wish you a successful meeting as well.
Good evening. Thanks so much to Geert and Yamina for that lovely welcome. So I'm just going to give a very brief framing of the spatial dimension of the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs. But really first, the fact that space, that urban planning and design is in the UN agenda at all is already a major achievement. If we go back 40 years, in fact I think it's 40 years this month, to the original Habitat Conference, first time the UN community, the global community, looked at cities, human settlements. It was a time of rapid rural-urban migration, a time of refugee crisis, rather like now, in fact. But as a result, urbanization was really seen primarily as a negative phenomenon 40 years ago. As a consequence, I've taken a piece from that initial document written in Vancouver. It urges the UN to, quote, enable the greatest possible number of scattered and dispersed rural settlements.
Evening, I will be very brief because I'm the moderator, so I'm not supposed to talk too much. I just wanted to sketch a little bit what's the origin and the idea behind the setting up of these conferences. I think as a Flemish, I can say that Flemish people are sometimes very modest, and so they are working mostly in their region. Something that is very particular for us. Well, I have for many reasons now a bit the free mind to step back from Flanders because I'm living in New York. But of course I know very well which capacity there is in Flanders. There's a lot of innovative urban policy. There's a strong practice in urban design. And maybe also it's a region that is very complex in a way. It's very small. There's a lot of people living. They don't live in a very radical, dense way as in New York, but it's a very densely populated area. We've been very strong in making infrastructure. Martin will talk about that. And we made the first railway tracks that were really used by people.
But to present something modest, in fact, in the light of the challenge that we heard, the Flemish experience is quite a modest experience. It's 15 years of policy and projects. But at the same time, I can say that I never thought about it in that sense. It's a spin-off of the work we did with UN Habitat. The work we did in the 90s on the localizing Agenda 21 that we published in the Urban Trialogue. In fact, it is what we did in Flanders, or started in Flanders 15 years ago. It's a kind of spin-off. But nevertheless, Belgium is a small country. Flanders is only a part of that small country. It's a modest experience. Nevertheless. So, mine is about 4 points. But first of all, I will give you a brief introduction about the context of the origin of the work, because this was conceived in the late 90s, took off in the beginning of this millennium, and of course was entirely conditioned, entirely defined by the mood of the time. The urban condition, the rural condition, the way these were perceived in our country. That will be number one. And then something unexpected happened, what I would call the project mode. Suddenly, investment returned to the city, and very famous projects in Berlin, in Rotterdam, and in Barcelona, and many other places came to the fore and gave a sort of example.
That's right, this way. Thank you very much, Flemish House, for your generous invitation. Thank you, Jens. In 2012, I had the opportunity to live here and to work in Parsons, the new school, so any excuse is good to come back to New York. Currently, I'm working at the University of Antwerp, where I had the opportunity to concentrate on the integration of infrastructure. This is really, really small. I'm afraid we're going to lose all the details. Anyhow, concentrating on infrastructure, how can we integrate mobility in our cities? So that's not only merely a technical facility, but it becomes also a public space. So currently I had the opportunity to work in Toronto, integrating a new LRT line, and working in Paris on an exhibition on passages, small-scale infrastructural enhancements, trying to improve the accessibility of neighborhoods. We're also working internationally with our research group, together with universities. We are trying to concentrate on studio-based learning and which way can we use urban design to improve collaborations with local communities, local stakeholders. But this evening I was asked to talk to you about the ringscape, the ring around Antwerp.
I'll hold the mic. Thank you. My name is Kate Orff. I'm very pleased to be here at the Flanders House. And also, on a personal note, representing Columbia, not only my office, SCAPE, which is based in Lower Manhattan, but as Director of Urban Design in Columbia, it's very exciting for me to participate in this discussion. I know that Columbia and Leuven, through my predecessor in urban design, Richard Plunz, have a long history of working together, and I think Jens and I are trying to work on our generation's challenges with equal commitment. So I'm going to show, I've dramatically tailored my presentation. I'm only going to show a couple of slides and try to just make some very key broad brush points. I'm going to show this one project, which is titled Living Breakwaters, and it was in fact coming out of the Rebuild by Design process that Martin spoke of, but also it was a project that came out of basically 7 years of research of my office prior to the RBD competition. So basically, we were charged with, and as a landscape architect and urban designer, I've been totally committed to our bioregion, trying to understand the kind of particularities of urban nature here in New York City. And during this past years, as I've been practicing in New York, we had some very dramatic, what you would call extreme weather events. Hurricane Irene, which was a high rainfall event, and Superstorm Sandy, which had some incredible winds and lives lost. So anyway, this is my sort of metaphor of working in New York as a landscape architect. You're holding on, trying to conceptualize the next urban design of the next 100 years.
Proposing to invest more into corridors. Let's bundle those 7-minute buses into one corridor where they could stop at each and go there every 10 minutes at least, and let's focus on redevelopments or investments in additional houses along those corridors.
Yeah, I think the Metrolinx project, one of the interesting things about Toronto is they have frequent bus service, and that makes a very big difference. The other good news is, at least in the statistics I've seen, is the younger generation of people, your generation, doesn't own cars or want cars the way my generation used to. So I think there are some things that you can leverage, but I think that's the issue is hopefully the next generation will be a little smarter about that.
Several questions, very basic
Yeah.
questions you launched. There are ideas which change the world, but the question is whose ideas and where do they come
Yeah.
from?
Yes.
And who's entitled to push to the fore his ideas and reject other ideas? But it's a very, very difficult question. I don't have a clear answer. If I go back to our experience, we started with an interdisciplinary confusion. Main task of government is to guarantee that the common can happen. And what we saw is, my thought was, well, the most difficult will be to convince the market forces. In fact, it was not. The most difficult was the public authorities to join the co-productive effort, because the market forces saw benefit in it. Saw benefit in the park and the playground and people participating in it and not being obliged to fence their thing and having cards in it. They saw the benefit of it. Government still celebrating isolation of different sectors. They are not yet convinced that in a project condition they don't have a choice, or a project will not happen. They have to go for this kind of co-production.
I lived at the periphery, about a half an hour to 45 minutes away from the central business district, to the central city. However, it was based on, the cost was based on location. Those who lived farthest paid the greatest, and therefore it improved access, but it wasn't accessible for the poor. Also here in Brooklyn, there are a lot of zoning and land use here in New York City, but particularly in Brooklyn, there are a lot of zoning and land use changes for communities that have been impacted by marginalization. And as a result, you have gentrification, you have increased investment in these neighborhoods, but then you also have displacement. The poor are being displaced from these neighborhoods because they can no longer afford to live in them. And so my question for you are, in your urban regeneration projects, if the conversation of affordability has come up.
It has come up. The solution is far away. In my experience, whatever you do, you gentrify. Build a school, a new wing to an art academy, a starter center for it is gentrifying. But maybe this is not a reason to abandon the thing. I think you can mitigate gentrification, so that there is at least a guarantee of a social mix, that there is at least a guarantee of accessibility of schools and playgrounds and kindergartens and that sort. It is so that and that the basic qualities, the park, the beach, are at least accessible. It is not touching the main issue of the ground of poverty. But I think besides urban design, there are other interventions, government interventions, and other needs for welfare redistribution.
I work with businesses. I'm a sustainability analyst, so I come from the urban space, but right now my job is to look at businesses and tell them if they're sustainable, why they're sustainable, where there are the gaps, right? So there's a lot of scoring mechanisms that they use, like the Urban Sustainability Index, CDP, and so on and so forth. The question is, when I work with them, when I look at their data and when I look at the indicators, there's a big gap in terms of how they're affecting the urban environments and how they're being rewarded or they're being sort of punished, right? So we cannot give away the fact that actual urban areas are being shaped significantly by businesses, like big businesses, like corporations. So in the new project, 21st century, how can we set up that linkage? If you talk about urban access, if I'm giving space for access, if I'm creating space for employees, impacts, environmental, so on and so forth. So what kind of indicators can we create to help the businesses to reward them or to kind of like warn them that they're not doing good or they're doing great?
You're talking more about the indicators. What would be good indicators of improvement, or one of the problems I always have with indicators are they're easy to gain too. They work and they don't work. So the question is, substantively, when we talk about access, we're not just talking about physical access. We're talking about a social quality of access. When I talk about New York, do I worry about the banker who walks to work or the cleaning lady who has to take 3 trains? And so those maybe some of my colleagues have a better answer. I find the indicators, to me, the best indicators are measures of improved social equality, not anything else. In other words, when you read that the heights and weights of children across social classes begin to significantly begin to change because everyone's getting the same nutrition. Those become the indicators to me, that's always a hard one. I understand why we're focused on indicators and sustainability goals right now, but I think in the end we can't lose sight of what the substance is.
I have just a quick answer relative to some experience in an urban design studio at Columbia. For example, last semester we were looking at the Rio de Janeiro corridor, and the largest landowner there was a steel corporation, CSN. It was essentially sitting on vast acres of undeveloped, fallow land, including a major railway right-of-way, which is incredibly valuable, just even as as a linear corridor that could be connective. And so I feel like that is a kind of corporate responsibility that defies the concept of indicators, but that needs to be marshaled towards this concept of shared goals. And an example of a zone that I think is a good case study is, strangely, in Northwest Arkansas, where you have Walmart, Tyson, you have a series of maybe 4 to 5 major corporations, corporate businesses that are investing in a regional approach to philanthropy and looking at schools, looking at cultural institutions, and trying to invest in that entire region of Northwest Arkansas in a kind of coordinated way as a cluster of cities so as not to compete. But they came together literally as a corporate council and decided that it was in their benefit, frankly, and self-interest to have, Head Start in the schools and to have better educated workforce and so on. So what do I know? I don't know what to ask them exactly. I would show best practices and worst practices, and I would begin to take and hold feet to the fire in the case of the worst practices.
Yeah.